Hello everyone, welcome to sunny downtown Lithgow, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on the mechanical side of the Model T. I will also be showing you the driving, starting driving, let's get it in the right order, but this first part will just be the mechanical side, what makes it work, some of the differences between the earlier models and my last of the series. As you can see, little Marianne the Diane is sitting next to me, and my little Mitzi Mazda just tucked in the corner there. The poor old Subaru is consigned to out in the street, or out in the driveway. Okay, so here we go. So the beauty of the Model T is the bonnet just comes straight off the car. It literally just slots into place, and there it is, sitting looking like a bit of a butterfly on the ground. So it just sits there quite nicely. So here we go. Here's the engine from both the carburetor and exhaust side, because these are a side valve engine, 4 cylinders, 170 cubic inch, rated at 20 horsepower, produce a little bit more than that, but not a great deal. So the main thing is this is a 2627, mine's 27, but the 2627s are known as the improved Fords, and there are differences between this and the earlier models. The main difference is the coil box location, which is that there, and there is a coil, one per cylinder, one per spark plug, same as modern cars. I'll get more details on the coils in a minute. I've got a couple out because I'm not opening this up. It gets a bit tricky to seal it up. On these later ones, that's where the coil sits, because the fuel tank is now inside this scuttle. There's the outlet for it, running across down to the fuel filter and gravity into the carburetor right there. And that's how it runs. Whereas on the earlier models, it was actually, we'll just move back here a bit, underneath this front seat, again, gravity through to the carburetor. As you can see, the fall, oh, it's a bit hard from this, but the fall from the tank to the carburetor is not great. So of course, if you're going uphill, the fuel runs backwards, car stops. So you needed a good head of fuel, or this is where the old story about Model Ts having to reverse up hills comes from. Nothing to do with their ability to climb the hill, just the ability to get fuel through to the carburetor. Whereas these ones under the scuttle, you can't see it, but it's actually right up under there. So it's a 10-gallon tank. There's your filler there. Again, as I said, gravity feed through the carburetor, but the beauty of it is with the height, you don't have any issues with the fall of the fuel into the carburetor under gravity. Now in the earlier ones, so they didn't have this dashboard like this. The firewall tended to be flat because obviously there was no tank above it, and the coil sat underneath here on the firewall with your ignition switch usually mounted actually on the box or near it. The later ones did go to a key type system like this. The others had keys, but they were only vaguely called a key. They were more vaguely a key. They were more a switch to switch between battery and magneto. All of them from day one have had a battery and magneto position. The earlier ones didn't have battery ignition as such because they didn't have starter motors, but you would still run a dry cell battery just to power your coils for starting, because it just makes it easier. And that's what we do on these ones. Mine, obviously enough, has a generator sitting here and a starter motor down on the other side. But getting back to the coils, let's deal with the ignition. So you've got your 4 plugs there, lead straight across, one per coil. This little beastie is a coil. And that's the size of it. So it gives you an idea of the size. So it's a wooden coil. So you've got 2 contacts on the side and 1 on the base. So when it sits in the box, it just makes contact in the box. The power comes in from either your battery or your magneto across the bottom to the bottom coil, bottom contact, and that powers the coil all the time. And then you have the lower contact here is the one through to the spark plug, and the top one is down to the timer, which probably is going to be a bit hard to see, but it's just tucked in down there. Now that timer literally just completes the circuit. So it doesn't take high tension current. The only high tension current is going from your coil to your spark plug. The rest is all low tension. The timer simply just creates the circuit, completes the circuit to fire the individual coil for the individual spark plug. These coils are, to me, they're lovely little pieces in themselves. They're, you know, all quite well made. That back slides, or that back there it is. That back there slides off to gain access to the interior. You've got a set of points on the top which buzz, and when we get to the starting, you'll hear that. When I turn the battery ignition on, they'll get to buzz. But the inside, this is the inside of them. So it's all tar. This one here I've redone. This right-hand side is the primary and secondary winding, and there is a capacitor in this side. What normally goes is the capacitor. This one's been dug out but not replaced, and this one's been replaced and the tar's been melted and put back in. Now, I'm not technical enough to be able to tell you, sorry about the noise in the background, my dogs have decided they've got to bark at next door neighbour. Yeah, so I'm not technical enough to be able to tell you how the primary secondary windings work. You can Google that, or more importantly, I might get my non-relative John Hunter to come and do his own one on that, because he has a 26 Model T. So he's the electrical expert, and he's far better at it. So that's pretty much how it works. There's, as I said, very little difference otherwise. There's a couple of minor differences. Very early one had no plate covering the valve chest. Later ones, all these ones do. Gearbox is, again, almost exactly the same, although there is a wider brake band within the gearbox. And there are a couple of ears on the top of the gearbox, which then fit onto the back of the block to give it a bit more support. The earlier ones didn't have. I know I've mentioned it before, but there is no water pump. It's physically, it's just thermosiphon. There is no fuel pump, as I've just said, and there is no oil pump. It is a splash feed system. Because the gearbox and the engine all run on the same oil, the magneto, as it's spinning around, generating the current, it's also throwing oil everywhere with inside, all over the gearbox, all over the engine. I then have this little line that's been cut into the top of the transmission housing, known as the hogshead, and this is a high flow oil line through and down to the front main. And that just gives you a bit better, because again, when you're going uphill, the oil's all down the bottom. Yeah, you know, it can be a slight issue, so that just gives you can't over oil it from that point of view, so plenty of oil flow to the front. I'm just trying to think, what else can we show you now before I actually try to start it? That's about it. That's the horn, and that's the 26-27 mounting for the horn. That's one tap and a sediment bowl. That's all that came with the Ford. I have a separate filter on the other side because I've got a bit of an issue with crap in this tank, and in fact my fuel filter, which has only been on for a couple of days, is really quite cruddy, so I'll probably be changing that one again soon, but they're cheap. I just keep replacing them. I've actually got to shorten it a bit too. There's a slight kink in the bottom, and then I have a separate tap, cut-off tap here, that's in the off position now. Turn it around to face the pipe and that's on. So that's where you turn the fuel off. Otherwise they can leak quite badly. They don't have great seals, and there's very little in those carburetors. They're literally just a surface displacement type, that vaporizing carburetor. Large surface piece of fuel. As it vaporizes, it gets sucked up through the center, and that's your needle and seat in there that's adjustable from inside the car. Anyway, we'll leave it at that, and we'll get the girl started. Thank you. Here we are again, and we're going to now do the preliminary checks ready to start the car. Now, the car actually hasn't been started since the 20th of oh, I just realised I put the wrong date on the thing. It's the 3rd now. 20th of February. So it is cold. I've rolled it out of the garage, which is just behind me there. I tend to just pull it out of the garage and start it outside. So there's a few things to check: oil, water, fuel, and there's a few things to lubricate. I've actually done most of those already because I didn't want to put you through all that. But essentially what you've got is a number of these little oilers here. Springs, another one under there, back there, and then you've got a number on the rear as well, so they're just filled up with oil each time you use the car. So okay, let's get a check. So first off, radiator. Let's open our radiator up. These are non-pressure systems, so they will leak water until they get to the level they want to be, and after that they're pretty right. And I don't know if you, oh yes, you can just see the coolant down there. That's where it usually sits, so that's perfect. I haven't actually topped this radiator up for quite some time. The radiator is new. It's a new Berg's radiator. The old one sitting up in the roof, it would work, but yeah, it would lose, it would get too damn hot. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, we've done the radiator, we'll check the fuel. So we open this up. Now, my fuel cap is some beautifully turned brass piece, which is some better quality than the original. The original was similar, just stamping to the radiator cap. So there's my beautiful brass one. God, it's lovely. Anyway, now, fuel gauge. Oh, that's simple. One stick. Put stick in, pull stick out, and you've got nearly 3/4 of a tank there. You can just see where it's wet. So that gives you an idea how much fuel. You look for where it's wet. Anyway, so that's right. We've got plenty of fuel. So back with radiator cap. Fuel cap. Here. Sometimes I need to put the brain into here before I engage the mouth. Obviously enough little breather hole right in the top of that cap so that it doesn't create a vacuum and stop the fuel flowing. I will now I'll just put that in there for the moment. My fuel gauge sits under the front seat. Now the next thing we have to do is check the oil. Now on this car I have a period accessory which is still produced, and that is this little accurate gauge, and it's a lovely little piece. Unscrews. Gonna be tricky to do this one-handed, so I'll do it from the bottom. Pull it out, and it's got graduations of OK, excess, and low. So it's well within its range, but I'll check it from underneath as well. That's why I haven't wiped that one off and re-dipped. Now the thing with the Model T is because they were produced well in excess of 15 million of them. So the number of accessories, oh god, it's incredible. You can find books of accessories for these cars, everything from the most ridiculous and useless to absolutely brilliant and useful. And that accurate, and as I said, that's brand new and it's still produced, is one of the extremely useful ones. Now, but to check the oil, normally we have to do the bit I hate doing, which is get on the ground and under we go. And what we have, there was a little pet, I hope you can see that. So you've got a petcock up the top, and there would normally be another one in there, but as you can see, that's where the Accurate's taking its oil from. So the way you do it is you open this top one and oil comes out. So you've got plenty of oil. Now if you're out and you open that top one and oil didn't come out, you would then open the bottom one, and as long as you've got oil in there, you're pretty right. If you don't, you need to put it in. But anyway, so I've got oil, so we don't have a worry. And I also found a tiny little O-ring down here, plus an ant. Anyway, okay, so bear with me while I now get up off the ground. You get a tour of my bit of my yard. Right, okay, up off the ground. So now we are going to start said little girl here. So round the side, into the back door, lift up the back floor, and turn on battery isolator. Right, first job. Shut door, back around front, and you'll see that the way I'm doing it is the way I always do it, and I tend to start it from the outside. I don't get in the car to start. Once the car's warmed and it's being used, I do, but this first start I always do from the outside. Don't ask me why, it's just the way I've always done it. Okay, so we turn fuel on. So now that tap is in direction of the fuel flow. The fuel's on. We come round here. We make sure the spark lever is set fully to retard. We get the throttle lever and we just take it down a little bit, onto the choke, all the way out, and one complete turn anti-clockwise, which riches the mixture. Now, the other thing to make sure, handbrake is all the way back, so it's holding the car in neutral and it's also applying the rear brakes. If, particularly in winter, this happened, more so in the day, not so much now with our multi-grade oils, but in the old days with the very thick oil in the gearbox and engine, cold weather, you've got all these plates. The high speed clutch is a series of driven and driving plates. There's, well, I can't remember the number, but we'll say there's 20 of each. And if they're held out, if the handbrake's on now, they're actually held apart, but the oil will get in there because the gearbox and the engine is full of the same oil, and if the oil was really thick and cold, it could transmit drive when you first started it. We don't tend to have that problem now. Anyway, so let's get on with the start. So I leave the ignition in the off position. We have a floor button down here, and I give it 4 cranks. Like that. And then I all the way back in, leave the mixture rich, but the choke off. Now, of course, she's being watched, so let's see if she'll play the game. Now, hopefully you'll hear the coils. We'll try and get them if they do. There it is. That's the coils buzzing. So now we just go back and... Oops. And she's running. So we advance the spark and start to wind the choke back, the mixture back on. Back to where it was. There we go. And we just reduce the revs a bit. Now here also, I switched from battery, and it's now running on the internal magneto, and the battery is not being used. And there we are. Running Model T. Okay, I'll stop for a second, I'll put the bonnet back on, and I'll get in, put the camera on, make sure I've got a decent angle so that you can see what I'm doing, and we'll take it for a little drive. That's the me over the noise, and you can see my feet. So we've got brake, reverse, low and high gear. So I'm still holding it on the handbrake. We don't need the brake so much. In fact, it won't go anywhere even if I put it into the neutral position. So all we do, put on the reverse pedal, little bit of throttle, and I hope that explained a little bit of it. It's a bit hard with the noise to talk to you. I've actually got a radio mic coming. Should be here this week. So if the if you need more explanation, I can always do it with the radio mic, which might hopefully mean I can chat while we drive. So, but it's a fairly simple process. The problem is it's completely opposite to the way you would drive a manual car. So the trick is you've got to remember that your foot is off if you don't wish to have any drive, unless you're in top gear. Whereas of course the major panic is people go, oh, straight down on the clutch pedal, and of course what they've done is put it in first. You probably would have seen there are times that I've got the handbrake lever in the vertical position, which means I'm out of high gear, so I can select low when I need it, and basically the car's just rolling. And then when I release it back down again, close the throttle, lift my foot off the pedal, and open the throttle back up, and we're in top gear. It's amazing what it does in top gear, and it's amazing how much just closing the throttle will slow the car down. So in some ways you don't really need to do much. Around town, because this is the 27 and it has the wider brake band in the gearbox, I tend to use the foot brake. It's also the one that activates my tail lights or my brake lights. You can actually stop it by pushing on the reverse pedal as well in an emergency. But for instance, as I think from memory, or you should remember, there's only brakes on the rear wheel and in the transmission. So if you're going down a steep hill, you put the brakes on slightly, roll a little bit, and hold that in and keep you at a reasonable speed, and then you can just adjust by using your foot brake. The trick with the foot brake is you don't want to hold it on too long at any high revs, because it can then burn. So if you release it, it gets oil back into it, cools it down, you can reapply it. So you use it in gradual things, whereas the rear brakes are just your standard lined brakes in a rear drum. So it means that you can just leave them on to a degree, pull back a little bit more if you need a bit more braking, use the foot pedal, and you can always put it in low gear as well. That'll take you down any hill very slowly, pretty much the same way you get up the hill, slowly, but it gets there. You probably also saw why there's this chain on, because the key falls out and it stops it falling through the numerous holes in the floorboards. Anyway, look, we'll leave it at there for the moment. I'll probably take this out again later on. I just remembered I have one of my watches to take back to the repairer, because even though I only got them back the other day, it's stopped working. So I might even run into town in this. Anyway, hopefully that helps. We'll talk to you later. Bye.